Bree Perez, and I'm a descendant of Creek Indians. Wait, don't say Indians. Creek Native First Nation.
Creek Native First Nation.
Creek
Okay.
First Nations.
Creek First Nation. And you, Christina, you are?
Hi, I'm Christina Flint-Lowe, and I am Bree's cousin. We're both of Creek ancestry, and we are members of the Porch Band of Creek Indians, located in Atmore, Alabama.
Right. And you're cousins, and so your mothers were sisters, 100% Creek, is that right?
Yes, they our mothers are siblings, and we're matrilineal through my grandmother. So my grandfather.
Yeah, I'll say Grandpa.
Yeah, both of them.
Huh. And what I know you both have children and you work outside the home. So fill us in a little bit about that. How many children and what kind of work you do?
I have 2 girls, and I manage a surgery center.
Yes, I know. That's where I met you. Christina?
I have one son, Liam. He's 3 going on 4, and I work as a nurse practitioner at the Veterans Administration, close to home.
I grew up in Lehigh Acres, which is right next to Fort Myers, and then moved to Tampa.
Okay. And so let's talk a little bit about what it was like for each of you. And I'll start with you, Bree. Growing up with an Indigenous people's background, how was that for you as a child and on through your teen years?
It was something that I always felt a connection to, but we didn't really have, I think, much culture growing up. I think Christina can attest to that as well. We grew up going to the reservation, once or twice a year, but the only other Native Americans that I knew were my cousins or my aunts and uncles. So we really didn't have as rich of an upbringing as I would have liked. But a lot of that is due to, moving outside of the reservation and really just not having that growing up as a kid, as well as our parents probably didn't have much of that as well.
Okay, so that must have been somewhat lonely in some way. I know you have said in the past you didn't feel like you were seen.
Yeah, so I can remember, having friends in school, and we'd celebrate, Black History Month or Hispanic Culture Month, and that was something that I never truly got to indulge myself in. I can remember very vividly history class, we quickly brushed over Andrew Jackson, and that's pretty much really all we learned was Andrew Jackson and the Treaty Act, but really never dug deep into it. And it wasn't until I became older that I really started to get invested into it and try to learn as much as I could about being Native American and what it means and how special it is.
Mm-hmm. And Christina, what was your experience like?
I like Bree. We didn't grow up on the reservation. Our grandparents moved due to socioeconomic constraints, and they had to move out of the Alabama area for work. And grew up in LaBelle, which is a small community, a little inland from Fort Myers. And so, and it didn't seem like my mom, our aunts, Bree's mom, no, there was not a lot of discussion about our history or that even that we were Native American. And I think, like Bree, I'll second Bree. I've always felt a sense of connection. I've always felt like there's more to me. There's more. There's like that I never really understood. I just intuitively knew that something was there. I didn't know exactly what or how to put the pieces together. And we, in growing up, and I'm not sure why they didn't speak about the history or until we got, we were enrolled and started to go up and visit, like Bree said, once or twice a year. We'd start to visit more family, and then you start to think, well, there's more to this. And so a sense of, as Bree said, going through school, didn't really always identify with my Native side. It was just mainstream. You just kind of went with the mainstream. I grew up going to Catholic school. So, you understood the colonialist aspect. Like Bree said, we discuss history in school, but we rarely discuss authentic Native American history in school. And we hear about Columbus, but nobody hears about like the doctrine of discovery and what drove a lot of the colonialist acculturative actions that took place to America's indigenous peoples. So I grew up only really knowing one side, and that would be, the patriarchal colonialist aspect. And I didn't understand my Native side. So I think I appreciate you talking with us, and it's part of your journey. And I think Bree and I have discussed it on the side. This is a part of our healing journey as well, because, this is us stepping out and saying, we're the generation that's been tagged to be the ones to say, wait a minute, there's more to it. Exploring and expanding and starting to learn a little more.
I don't recall. Of course, it was many years ago when I was in school, but what I heard was total myth. Never heard any truth whatsoever. So on that topic, Bree, when you mentioned that you heard about Andrew Jackson, but what is it you would have liked to have heard more now, looking back with the wisdom that you have?
That's funny. I don't know. I just remembered this, but in elementary school, I can vividly remember we, for history class, did a musical, and it was the song from Pocahontas. And that's not the Native American history. There's far from the truth. And I wish that, we would have had a little bit more of a look into the beginning and how it happened, and the way they teach Thanksgiving, and they have the kids dress up as pilgrims and Indians, and that's just it. It was just a happy feast and whatnot. There's an ugly truth to all of this, and it would have been nice to have learned about that, to dive deeper in that as a younger youth, to really make that grow with that. We talked about the Holocaust, and there's ugly truth to that, but that the Native Americans and what they went through was never talked about.
Right.
Even past Thanksgiving, like celebrating Columbus Day. I always thought that was kind of a joke. And, even like now, even still, my kids get the day off, and my husband gets the day off, and he's government, and they get Columbus Day as a holiday off. So these are things that I wish that we would learn the truth about them. I wish the kids would learn a little bit more into it. I try my best to teach my kids, and actually just talking about my residential schools with my 15-year-old today. She'd never even heard of it before. And this wasn't that long ago that these were in place.
Residential schools, is that what you're calling the boarding house schools?
Yes.
Yeah. I want to come back to that, because I know just from my previous interview with a few Indigenous folks on my last road trip, what a horrendous thing that was for our Native American families. Christina, do you want to elaborate anything on what Bree has said?
You brought up the learning about she was talking about learning about Columbus, and what would we want to explain, and it would be, I think the way we portray Thanksgiving, the Indians sitting down with the pilgrims, and it was a great situation. We like to there's a literal and a figurative aspect when you speak about Native American past, and we like to take the figurative and make it what the comfortable aspect of it. So it's often easy to make it comfortable. So we can kind of forget about the realities and suppress the realities of what happened to the Native peoples of America. No, actually, across the world, really. But when you're thinking of Thanksgiving, I think it's part of we portray a certain image. That goes into the Indian, Native American. You're supposed to look a certain way, be a certain way. And if we were to bring that back into the schools and start educating about what were the true realities, and specifically you asked, about the boarding school era, the Native Americans have often been seen as a hindrance, as a problem. And I think it was common to refer to the Indian problem. And that hence these different tactics of the government to control the Indian problem, to rid the government, get us out of the way. So, manifest destiny, move west. Well, there was one big thing standing in the way of that movement west, and that was American Indian tribes across the nation. And the boarding square was an element of that. And they would take acculturation and assimilation, those big nasty words, and they would, that was another attempt to take the culture away from us. And I think that kind of, Native Americans like this, it's circular, it's not linear. We like to think circularly. And thinking back to the intro to our conversation today, how Bree and I have grown up, we are the result of a lot of the tactics from early on, where they did try to take the culture away. And we're this generation, a few generations ahead, that if we don't step out and take these events and these opportunities to speak with you, we risk losing that for the next 7 generations, our future generations. So the boarding school element was a part of that, where you would remove the young children from the home and take them miles away and subject them to very rigorous military-based schooling programs that were very not in line with the native culture or the native style. And then that took away culture. It took away language. Language was one of the biggest losses there, because they would be punished for speaking their language. And it really devastated that. From that generation further, that created a lasting legacy of assimilation amongst Native communities.
And it's a touchy subject that, I try to walk lightly on, but these camps, these schools were directed by churches, funded by the government.
Yes.
So, and Christina and I have talked about this. It's a really touchy subject, or tricky subject to maneuver. Christianity and even to present day. I've always been, I think, family members, or even like my husband's family, they are very big into church. That's something that I personally, I know the story of Turtle Island and Mother Earth, and that's something that I've always really felt deeply connected to. And I just, I wish that sometimes, and this again comes from the years of assimilation and what that's done to each generation, moving past all of the schools and whatnot, and just take a deeper look into your history and really think about, what are your beliefs? Why do you believe this? And that's something that is a personal journey of mine right now.
Is to go more into your own history and background.
And religion.
And religion.
And beliefs.
Your own, yeah. Yes, let's just talk about that for a moment, because I don't know a whole lot about Indigenous folks and the way that they view their divinity, spirituality, interconnections, but I do read about the connection to all of nature as being a huge part of that. Would you say that's accurate, Bree?
Yeah, and I think Turtle Island, there's so many dialects and different nations out there, but and I'm learning myself. This is a journey that I'm on right now, but Turtle Island is Mother Earth, and that's something that unanimously all nations believe in. That the Creator created Turtle Island, which is what you see as present day Earth or North America, and that's something that I'm diving into right now and trying to learn as well. Something that wasn't taught to me, wasn't brought up in school or anything like that. So it's just a little journey that I'm on right now.
Well, and do you mind sharing a little bit about how that is making you feel to be in touch with that more?
Personally, for me, and I don't know if you experience this, Christina, going to Catholic church and whatnot, but my family, my mother and father were never really religious, but I grew up around people who were very religious, and I felt frowned, like I've never even been baptized. Everybody in my family's been baptized with me. I've never really felt connected. And I feel like, and I personally, like I struggle with that. It's like, am I wrong? Am I going to hell? Am I not going to be accepted? Because I just, I don't know my culture as well as I would like to. And I think that's some part of the healing, like Christina said, that I need, because I don't feel not valued, but I just don't feel, I don't even know what the word is to use, but I don't feel good enough almost, that I don't have those same thoughts as, other family members that are very religious, or even, friends and my husband's family. So it's a struggle that I deal with personally.
Christina, when Bree was saying she didn't feel good enough, you nodded your head. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think what she's touching on is, I think part of the discussion we're having today is like, how are we in the 21st century here, Native American or women of Indian descent, how are we navigating and managing our day-to-days? And Bree touched on a issue or a topic that I'm navigating myself. She's navigating the religious aspect. It's the sense of inferiority that is always been there, and you didn't have a name. I couldn't put a finger on it. I didn't quite understand it, but it's this underlying hum that's always there, that's always been present. And you're in Catholic school and you're seeing this and you're seeing that, and it's the sense of, and that goes back to the history as well, because when you talk about colonialists and the people who came to conquer, there was always that sense that a superiority, we're better, this is the right way, this is the way you should be. Mm-hmm. And I think Bree's touching on that, what it's bubbling up in our generation, and here we are, and there's a guilt aspect to it too, because as my mother's Native American, my father's is Caucasian. So I battled that internal duality where I have benefited from a lot of these colonialist perspectives and these aspirations, a success. You go to school, I've had access to a lot of these things, but again, it's always that hum that remains, that underlying, there's something there that I'm missing, that I'm looking for, and how do I get the answers to that? So the inferiority issue comes in because we've always been told this is better, this is the way, and having, coming in that circular thought process again, thinking about, well, our ancestors were placed on an immense stress, had to make really unfortunate decisions, life, death decisions, to move this way or that way, and accept to live in this society. And in order to live in this society, you had to accept what was always said, this is better, this is the way. Right. And then over time that got lost. So we are now trying to, again, patchwork, get that fabric together and figure that journey out.
And is this a journey that you take in solitude, Bree, as you're, putting the missing pieces back together again for yourself?
I think
how do you do that? I guess that's my question.
Researching and reading, trying to connect and reach out to other members of other various tribes and just learn culture as much as I can. It helps that I have a cousin who's in the same journey as me, and we have a few other cousins that are also going through this as well. I think it's our generation that's really trying to connect as best we can, and even keep the closeness as well. I grew up, I was always at Christina's house, they were always at our house. So it's something that I think I long for personally as well, is to keep the family together. So we, because these are the only Native Americans that I know. I want my kids to be immersed in that.
That's what I was going to ask you. So how is it happening for your own children?
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to immerse them as much as I can, as well as talk to them. But I can never remember my mom talking to me about being Native American. And, you know, there were 11 kids that my grandparents had, or our grandparents had. I think my mom's on the younger side of the kids. So I think even through the 11 kids, it gets still a little bit less and less lost culture. You know, my mom doesn't have memories of being in Alabama or moving, and I don't think my younger aunt does either. So my thing is that I'm always going to talk to my kids and try to teach them as much as I know. When I'm learning, they're going to learn the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I learned how to make fry bread, and now I make that for them. I love it.
When I was in Colorado, there was a restaurant that was, he said, totally Native American. He traveled all across the United States, and he was Native American for the recipes, and fry bread was a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
So, Christina, what about your children? How are they learning? In the same way that Bree is doing it? You're helping them?
Yeah, like Bree said, you know, just kind of researching and, you know, letting him kind of find his journey too. Amy, I know that sounds weird at 3.5, or going on 4, but interesting story. I picked him up. My husband and I went to pick him up from school, and one of the teachers says, Liam had the funniest thing to say today. And we both like are going like, oh great, this could be anything. Oh man. She said, we asked him, Liam, are you Spanish? And he said, no, Liam Lowe Indian. I'm Indian. And so and that was like a sense of like, wow. Like,
yeah.
I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're doing something right.
Look at websites, Facebook, my own journey, and whenever I learn something new, I try to make sure that I involve him in any opportunity. If there's any opportunity, we live near, I live close enough to some of the Seminole, like the Brighton Reservation, and we went to Brighton Field Days and let him go and see and experience and kind of start to learn his own journey by being exposed. So as much as I can expose him, and going back as often, you know, we used to go back like once a year to the reservation, but I take every opportunity, you know, that I can, and I'm starting to try to make connections within the community so that we can he has those community connections fostered. And he's actually growing his hair right now, and that's something we talk about it, he's seen it. I'm not forced that on him, but it's become a part of his identity, and I'm going to let him make those decisions. And as long as he wants it to grow and he likes to get his braid, you know, so I'm trying to foster those on every angle, and at the same time learn my culture myself. So we're on the journey together in essence.
So if you had your way, what would you have the schools be doing differently to help your children with this learning?
I think that expanding the content. The content's very brief. It's very narrow. In showing the realities of both sides. There's been different processes, there's been different policies throughout the years, the Johnson C. O'Malley Act, the Indian Education Act. These are governmental processes that are out there to try to kind of implement more education. A lot of it comes back to community, and I think with Indian education, it's always about community. So how you incorporate that community and that way of thinking, I don't know, beyond the level, I think, of the conversation today, we could talk about that.
Well,
but expanding the understanding that making the reality that there's two sides, let's look at both sides, as hard as it can be.
And I will tell you, I interviewed a Mexican-American ethnic studies teacher in Tucson, and he was in 7 high schools. He had done an experimental program that ran 7 years, where they integrated Mexican-American history, art, literature in the school's core curricula, not an elective to learn about some cultural relevant subject. And it was amazing what happened to the children and to those teenagers. They started to really see themselves, and their esteem went up. They did better in science and math, even though that wasn't part of the curricula. And they just graduated in outstanding numbers. It was an astounding success. So we know how to do it. We just have got to do it. We've got to have the will to do it. And yeah.
Yeah, my 15-year-old, she actually was just talking to me last weekend. You know, they have clubs in high school and whatnot, and there's a cultural club, but they don't go over. So she asked if they go over Native American culture. They said no. She's like, well, can I form my own?
Good for her.
She's always been like that, but she. You know, she's like, but I don't know if anybody would come. You know, there's no other Native Americans in school, and so she's really, you know, it's funny to see her on the same journey as me at the same time. And I wish I would have been that age when I was starting my journey too. But yeah, she's trying to form something at her school.
So she is working on that.
Yeah.
I know it's difficult right now with COVID, and we don't even know what's going on with the schools, but that's her plan, and she's got the energy for it.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. You also told me a story about your daughter. She was 16, I think, and had gone for a driver's license.
Learner's permit.
Learner's permit.
And they asked her to fill out all your demographics and whatnot and what your race is. And she asked him if she could put, you know, Native American because she is a tribal member. And they told her no, that she needs to put Caucasian.
But in truth, she had every right to claim that, right?
And it struck a nerve in me, and you know, I got really emotional. I'm not going to lie, I cried, because to me it was like them telling her she's not Native American enough, you know, but she is.
Yeah,
she's an enrolled member. She's a tribal member. Just because her percentage is less than mine or less than my mother's doesn't mean that she's not Native American.
So is there an outcome to this that's different? Are you challenging this in some way?
Yeah, I need to research. I still have 6 more months before she actually gets her real driver's license. But that is something that I'm going to stick by, and we're not walking out of there unless she has that.
Good for you. I'm so sorry you have to do these battles so much on your own. You know, for both of you and for all Indigenous folks, it's like it's just constant struggle right now.